who is muted.
Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you could join us this evening. We have a nice big group here. I think that is part thanks to Sue and spreading the word a little more broadly than our usual invitations out to folks within Westminster, but going out to a couple other churches as well. So welcome, everyone. If this is your first time participating in one of our Thursday classes, we do some sort of class every Thursday on interesting topics related to racial justice or violence in Wilmington. So stay tuned. We'll keep you abreast of other topics that we cover. And so this evening we have Alma Scott with us, who is going to talk about microaggressions. And I met Alma just a few weeks ago. Someone connected us because I had done a lot of work with violence in Wilmington, and she was working with a group of women who had an interest in learning more about the issue and what can be done about it. So we got connected and we just had so much fun talking, and somehow decided this would be a great opportunity for her to address this topic in our Thursday night series. So welcome, Alma, and I'm going to let Alma give her own background and tell you who she is as part of the introduction. Thank you.
Let me just interject for a minute. I'm going to mute everybody because we're recording, and that way you won't be popping up as you chew on celery or, I don't know, answer the phone. So I'll mute everybody and then I'll unmute Alma and we'll be good to go.
So there, I unmuted myself. Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for coming. I'm 70 years old. I grew up in Arkansas until I was 10 or 11 years old. So I grew up in a segregated environment until the 9th grade in Virginia, which was when integration took place. I have a lot of self-confidence because I grew up in segregation. And so we learned that. We learned from our parents. We learned from the school teachers, from the doctors, everybody on that side of the railroad track, and the whites were on the other side. So I have a lot of self-confidence, and everybody that I grew up with, we had confidence. And we knew we had to be twice as good as white people because our parents and our church, they told us that we had to be twice as good to get half as far. So that didn't surprise us in any way. So I spent the last 42 years living in all white places. Started when my son was 3 years old with my husband's career. And so there's some things that functioning as the only Black woman, often in an all-white space, there are just certain things that I encounter. It doesn't matter what state, what city. I'm gonna hit into that. So microaggressions can be about race, they can be about gender, they can be about a disability, they can be about weight. But tonight we're gonna talk about color. The things that I'm going to talk about will all be because I'm Black and because I have kinky hair. You may have engaged, you may have suffered through some indignities or slights, but it would never be because you are Black. It just won't be. So, question for you. How many of you have ever sold your house, you decided to put your house on the market to sell it because you were going to move someplace else? Raise your hand. Have you ever sold your house? Okay, good. So that's a large number of people. Good. So here's the question. How many of you, when you sold your house, how many of you were asked to remove and to pack up all of your family photos? Okay, so Dick, you did? And somebody else.
We were asked to.
Right. So we have a few people who were asked. So what are some reasons that you were asked to not show any of your family photos? Let's go with Dick first. Good.
We were told that potential buyers would be less encouraged to think about this being their house if everywhere they looked, there were pictures of somebody else.
True. I got that too. Anybody else that sold a house? So we got the same story too, except for us, it was because we were Black. Go through, remove every framed picture of any Black relative and any Black artwork, any books about Black, anything, fiction, short stories, clear the house. No sign that you were Black, that you ever lived here. Sue, show slide 1, please. So this is me, the fall of 2019. And I was doing a group with my neighbors who I had been working with on grassroots political stuff. And I was constantly encountering some uncomfortable situations. So we had had maybe 2 groups of neighbors to talk about race before that. But I decided this time I had a basket with 9 slips of paper. I passed it around the room and each person pulled out a microaggression and we talked about it. But I did not disclose that it happened here in this community. And the reason I did that is because I thought it might be beneficial for white people to actually see the bandages. They represent the slights, the hurts, the indignations that a person of color who is in an all white space, that means it's a constant pecking at me. And so as I go through my day, I can end up looking like that. It could be 9 or it could be 10. So racial microaggressions are brief and commonplace daily verbal or nonverbal behavioral indignities that communicate hostile or derogatory racial slights and insults towards people of color. Okay, so you can take that down. So the term microaggression was coined in 1970 by a Black psychiatrist at Harvard University, and his name is Chester Pierce. Another reason that my family was told to remove my family portraits because they didn't want anybody, the realtor, is because she said, nobody white would buy this house. And we were living in predominantly white areas because it was safer for us upon relocation to live in a certain environment. And so one of the things I want to talk to you about tonight is sometimes some white people feel that to be mistreated, it has to come from somebody uneducated and is probably a Southerner. Well, as it turns out, that's a myth. That's not true. And one thing about Southern uneducated white people, I actually prefer them because they're honest. They're honest. They would say to my face, "You're just an uppity Negro girl." So that means I don't have to guess. I do not have to guess how that person feels about me. Driving the car, having an education, international travel, you're uppity Negro. You're out of your place. Now, the thing with moderate, liberal, well-educated white people, they're not so honest. They come at you in a different way. And it's usually, for me, with my experience, it's a lot of nonverbal, a lot of silence, a lot of being invisible. So I'm going to talk to you about what it looks like. So I'm going to go back to March 2017, when this grassroots political group started. And it's my husband and I are the only two Black people in the room, because it starts in this neighborhood. 2 blocks from me, I don't know any of the people in the room. And so we go in, we sit down, he sits separate from me and I'm on the opposite side. And we go around the room and we introduce ourselves. And then we talk about possibly what we want to do, what kinds of things do we want to focus on. And at that time, we were meeting in each other's homes every 2 weeks. So this is about maybe, I'm going to estimate maybe 6 months in. We're going to a neighbor's house for a meeting, and keep in mind, every 2 weeks, the same 20 people were showing up. So I get out of the car, and it's late August, so we have extended daylight. My husband is going to parallel park the car. I get out before he does that, and I stand on the sidewalk right in front of the woman who's going to host that group, that monthly meeting. And I stand there and I look and I see a white couple coming towards me, and I smile because I recognize both of them. So they're going to be going to the same meeting. And I notice that they're smiling, and as they get closer to me, something says, turn around and be sure somebody's not coming up on the backside. So I do, and I see another woman from the group coming. So here's what happens. They literally get right beside me, maybe just 4 inches away, that's it. I'm smiling and I'm getting ready to greet them. They greet each other, hug each other, call each other's name, and never say a word to me. Never. And so when my husband and I go inside, I was really thrown by that, because every 2 weeks for 6 months, these people know me. They didn't speak to me. And I'm holding this inside of me. I have to figure out, what am I going to do with that? Because if I speak up and talk to them about it, they could say, oh, you're just too sensitive. We didn't see you. And of course I'm thinking, but I was right there. And so later that evening, they come over and speak to me as if it never happened. What happened on the sidewalk never happened. So let's have slide number 2. Invisible. Even when I assimilated and stayed in my place, and when I say stayed in my place, I didn't complain to those white people about not speaking to me. I kept my mouth shut. I was agreeable. I was polite. They still ignored me. And one example of being absolutely invisible was right there. I have a friend who's a Quaker, and he went to the same meeting for 10 years. And each one's people always thought he was brand new. Okay, so that was slide 2, invisible. Okay, so you can remove that. Then I'm going to tell you what happened when the small group, 10 of us, got together for our very first gathering to write postcards. The postcards were we were going to advocate for some specific political issue or some piece of legislation, and we were just starting out. So this white woman who was my friend, I met her the very first night at the meeting, and she lived in another neighborhood, but she drove over and walked with me down to Brouhaha, where we met 10 other group members to write postcards. This was our first time, and we decided, well, we will meet and we will figure out how to get through it. So we're sitting down, come in, speak to a couple of people that I recognize because I'm a dog person. So I met somebody that had a dog. I saw him, met his dog. We go in and we sit down as a group and we start to discuss the strategy, who we're going to address the card to, what we might say. So I had a question, and I don't recall what the question was, but remember, there's only 10 or 12 of us at one table. So I lean in and I look down and I make eye contact because I see these people every 2 weeks. And so I ask a question. I got no answer, nobody. This is not a very long table. It's Brouhaha. It's a small table. We're packed in. So I thought to myself, oh, my voice was not loud enough. Let me clear my voice. Let me sit up and let me, ask the question again. And I raised my hand and I said, I don't think you heard me. So can I ask a question again because I need you to clarify something? And they say, yeah. So I repeat the question. And once again, they just look. Now, other people ask questions. People answered them. So my friend next to me gently kicks me under the table. And that's her way of saying to me, I can't believe this. And so we talked about it after the meeting was over and we went home, we walked home. She said, I kicked you because I couldn't believe it. I could not believe that you asked and they did not. But yet when somebody else asked a question, they got a response. Even if it was something as simple as we don't know, let's find that answer out. So let's go to another situation. About 2 months later, keep in mind that we're meeting in each other's homes. So we got to a point where I said to my husband, let's host. Let's host. So we said, okay. So we signed up and said, we'll host at our home. Now, before this, we have been in other people's houses. And what I have done is I have observed the group. Oh, let me back up. I worked for Philip Morris. And part of what I did as a facilitator and being in human resources is I work with people to prepare them for management positions. I work with people to prepare them to work with women when they didn't want to work with women. So I come from a family of observers. So I observed really well. So before I made decisions about these people, I was observing them, asking questions as they went to people's houses that they did not know. How do I know? Because I asked, do you know them already? Oh, no, don't know them. So it's okay. So we host. So they come to our house. So my husband opens the front door and I'm inside. My job is to escort people to the dining room so they can sign their name badge. And at that time, it wasn't cold enough for to have to hang a coat up or anything. So they came in, they got their name badge and they signed it and they wrote it. They put their names on it. I found out who didn't know anybody and I introduced them. And then maybe by the time we collected like 6 people, I said, oh, the meeting is over here in the family room. Go there and sit down. It's getting crowded here. They didn't move. They wouldn't move. And then other people would come in and they kept stacking and stacking in the corner of the dining room, and they would not move. So eventually the white group leader says, come on, get in here, sit down. We have to get this meeting started. Boom, they all moved. I asked 2 or 3 times to go sit down, and they would not do it. Another thing, other people at group meetings could ask a question, make a suggestion, and the group would have reactions to it. But whenever I asked a question or made a suggestion, nothing happened. It was met with silence. And as you know, silence, you can't do anything with silence. Silence leaves you by yourself. So this one white woman that I was casual friends with, I had told her about that concern. And so what she did was, at some point we saw each other again, and she pulled me aside and she said, I didn't believe you because I know these women, they're my friends. But when we met for coffee the other day, that initiative that you wanted and they didn't respond to you, I thought you were just too sensitive. I repeated the same thing you said. They thought it was a great idea. They had no recollection that you said anything. So let's go to slide 3, Sue, please. And after this, if you all have a question, we can entertain it. Body language. That's one of the first things that a person, we can tell a Black person or an Asian person body language. We can sort of read when we are in a room or we are where we should not be. The group of people it's how they respond to us or how they don't respond to us. We can pick it up, we can sense it. Most whites will deny it because it's what is done to us, you can't prove it. You know you feel it, you know you can sense it, but the person could say, I didn't do anything, you imagined it. And that happens to Black folks or brown people a lot. So let's talk about the body language, which we talked about. Even in a casual community gathering, sometimes I don't even get eye contact. I've noticed the dialogue between 2 white women or in between, they all look at each other. But when I speak, the heads are down, people are writing. It's like I'm too busy, I can't see you. So there is no acknowledgement. Ignored or dismissed. I didn't have a voice for a few years. I remember trying to figure out what I said that was so different than the white person who said it after me, and they made it credible. Okay, so you can take it down, the screen down. Does anybody have a question? Do you want to? And remember, you may have had this, but it's not because you got Black skin. And let's talk anybody have a question?
Remind me, please, Alma, where you were living during the experience you're describing?
Here in Wilmington.
In Wilmington.
The neighborhood by the Delaware Art Museum,
Mm-hmm.
the Highlands. Yep.
Gotcha.
All of this is happening right here.
Thank
Some
you.
version of this happens everywhere I've ever lived, some version of it. But I'm sticking with this because this is right here. And even in the workshops that I've done with group members of that grassroots group, they will say out loud, that can't be. That can't happen here. And see, that's the way of invalidating what I've just said happens. When white women in this neighborhood down the street will say, that doesn't happen here. Why is everything about race? Well, here's what I've come to realize. And from reading the book Caste, C-E-S-T-E, Isabel Wilkinson. So what I did was, I started to reflect all the way back to my son living in Virginia in different places. And what I came to realize is when he spent the night with his white classmates, and I would phone to go pick them up, and I would get there, and the mother would say, oh, the boys are still playing, come in, because it'll be 30 minutes before they're ready. So I would always go in and sit and visit. But what I started to notice, and I just really played all of this back somewhere in the last 3 years, every time they came to my house to pick their son up, when they were running late, they wouldn't come in my house. They never crossed that threshold. They would lean on the door, or they would stay in the driveway, but they wouldn't come in. And that goes back to why when I move and relocate, we must have no sign that a Black person lives there, because a white person won't cross my door to get their child. And you go back to when the group members came in my house for the first time, how they wouldn't get out of the corner to come sit down. And eventually one woman did admit to me that part of the problem is she did not know what to say to Black people. Now it took her, we had dinner and we were talking about some things, but it took her like maybe 6 months later for me to get a phone call. And I asked, what happened that you got in touch with this? She said, I have a Black housekeeper that comes every morning. And I usually try to not be in the house when she arrives. But one morning I was there and I watched her and I saw her getting ready to clean my toilet. And it dawned on me, the reason I am uncomfortable with you and not Africans from the continent. She said, I'm fine. I found myself with Africans from the continent. I don't have a problem. But it's you. It's you Black Americans born here that we enslaved. You make me feel guilty because I look at that woman cleaning my toilet and I realized she had no choice. And every time I see you, you make me feel guilty. Now, once she told me that truth, we became friends. The conversation became easier, that she stopped avoiding me at meetings. Because I knew every time she would disappear, she would run away. But I didn't understand what it was. And so I decided, back off, something is going on. Maybe she might share something with you. So are any of you surprised that white people don't want to cross my door and come in? How many of you are surprised? Or how many of you know that that's hard for white people? Marty, did you have anything?
I don't understand.
Yeah.
You're a person. I'm a person. We're in the same family, human family.
But for a lot of white people, depending on where you were raised, who raised you, Black people, for those of you who read the book Caste, from the very beginning, we have been thought of as less than human. And it was always here. It was even in the biblical script. It was always that we were less than, and that to socialize with us or to be near us will soil and dirty you, will pollute your whiteness. So that's hard for white people to come in my house, to come in for a meeting. And the second time we held the meeting, I said to my husband, let's do something different. I'll do something different. I'm gonna pull them all the way into the back of the house, into the kitchen. They have to go all the way in deep. And let's see if that will loosen them up. Let's take them out of this formal dining room. Let's put them all the way. Let's just drag them way deep, deep into the house. And so that's what we did. Some people adjusted to that because after our meetings, we also had a social hour where we would drink, we would drink wine and have cheese and this, that, and the other. And here's the thing, I don't know if you've heard of this before, but the Black woman is the lowest. A Black man is above her. We are the lowest. So my husband decided that he would just push himself and go in. I said, I'm not doing that, I'm tired. I'm just not doing that anymore. I'm just gonna let it be the way it is. So there will be women that took 2 years before they ever called my name. We were at a protest and this one woman finally called my name. Hey, Alma. Because I thought, well, who is she talking to? Because they never called my name. And eventually, they finally got comfortable. But here is one thing that one person wanted to know. Here we go. You are so articulate. You are such a good hostess. How do you know how to do this? And I'm thinking to myself, you know my husband works for DuPont. You know we do international travel. You know, she still says she can't get over it. I can't get over it. That you can do this and you're so articulate. And then one person says to us, my husband opens the door, doesn't know this person. So at each meeting, we would get a list. So we would know we're gonna have 6 new people that I've never seen before. And I sort of kept that in my head. And I would when they showed up to write their name, I could go, new person. Introduce myself officially, find out what they're interested in, and introduce them to somebody who's working on criminal justice, somebody, or if you're into environmental issues, that's the group over there. Let me introduce you. Because I was raised like that. And also because I've been on the receiving end of being ignored. And Sean, I would not do that with people. I made sure that I would introduce them. So this one man my husband opens the door. And do you know what he says to my husband? Are you renting this?
Oh.
Oh, yes. Are you renting this house? Meaning, yes, are you renting? Are you renting? Let's go to slide 4. Thanks, Sue. So this is about exclusion. All of my life, I've been told, get an education, speak the King's English, do this, do that, you'll be accepted. Nope, still excluded. In this group and in this community, not being invited to social gatherings and afforded an opportunity to get to know all the other members in the way that they do with each other, right here in the neighborhood, excluded. So when the next meeting comes or the next committee has been formed, I find out, oh, we went for a hike at the park the other day and we decided this. Well, that was my field of expertise, but they've already decided and I'm left out. So exclusion. We didn't think you would really like this. We didn't think you would like this. So we thought, why bother Alma? She won't like this. Okay, so you can remove exclusion. So what I've also done with my Race Talk group members or people that I talk race who really want to learn about it is like my Facebook post yesterday because of what has happened to all of the Asian American women that were murdered in Atlanta. So I had a post about that, and then suddenly late last night, about 11 o'clock, I posted a challenge. And I posted a picture of myself with one of my Chinese friends. And I say, challenge, post a picture of you. Post a picture of you with a friend who doesn't look like you. And I got 2 people right away. And then this morning I got another. And if it's something about our dogs or about flowers, I get like 60, 40, 3. And I told my husband 4. And because I typically know at least some of these people reasonably well, it was my way. As a matter of fact, I told somebody when she posted it with her horse, because I said, and you cannot use family members. Because another things that white neighbors will do to prove to me that they're not racist, they will show me a photo of their grandchild with a black child and say, see? And I'll say, see what? Well, look, this is good. And I'll say, what's good about it? That doesn't change anything. White children have been playing with black people even when we were enslaved until they got to that certain age where they didn't do it anymore. And that black child had to call that 10-year-old white boy Mr. Sam or Mr., or Miss Sally. So for me, that doesn't do it. And that's one of the things that I would say, if you get nervous and you're aware you're with a black or brown person and you know you're uncomfortable, do not pull out a photo of your grandchildren with a black child. That really rubs us the wrong way. It just does, because we know you're being performative, and we know it just doesn't work. Does anybody have a question? So let me tell you, let me go a little farther. The last slide, Sue, is number 5. It's called environment. An environment can be a college campus, that's a predominantly white college campus. And all of the buildings are named for white Confederates or white people who've done some pretty oppressive things to Black people in terms of laws and policies. Or it can be at a ski resort. Because my family, we snow ski. We're the only Blacks. So it means we own our own equipment. So something happens and my son breaks some fixture, so we had to go and rent something. So when we come in, we're dressed, you could look at we thought they could look at our equipment and sort of know we're seasoned, we've been doing this. They still make an assumption about what we want and not giving us the quality of what we asked for. And other Black people have experienced that same treatment of golfing, sailing, surfing. They have the right equipment, mountain climbing, and they need to go get something. The clerk will make assumption that they are a novice, they are a beginner, and they start to talk down to them. So let me give an example. For me, the environment is here in this neighborhood. Now, our choice would have been, which I did, at some point in these moves, I did ask, is there a predominantly Black community? And of course, there never was. But the drawback to that is our property would be devalued. Because anytime Blacks live with each other, even if they're upper middle class, their property's devalued. So we lose wealth to pass on to our son. So we stick it out for that particular reason. But let me go back and tell you a little bit about this neighborhood. I had 2 dogs, they were boxers. So we would walk, met this other woman, my dogs like their dog, that particular dog. And we walked almost every day. Winter, snow, it didn't matter. But particularly during the summer because of heat. So she would always say, I would say, let's go back this way and then we can swing by my house and sit in my yard and the dogs can have some water there. And she would say, no, we're closer, let's go this way. And so it took me a while to figure it out, but we would go to her house, sit on her front porch, let the dogs have water and recover. But then it dawned on me, she never wants to come into my yard. But if I encounter other people who walk their dogs and they get along with my dogs and they live someplace else, it doesn't matter Black or white. If I say, come into my yard before you walk that 2 miles back, have some water, they always say, fine. But the neighbors here in the community would not come in my yard. So I stopped. I started saying, no, we will go home. And so my dogs did not have that extra lounging that they had gotten used to. So in this neighborhood, I encountered 2 Black women that always had on, I'm sorry, so you can remove the slide. Thank you. They had on a gray uniform, white collar and a white apron. And I thought, who does that in this 2014, 2015? And then I came to realize that's a signal. Do not be afraid, they work here, they belong. In uniform, it's what these women who were Black housekeepers, they have to wear a gray uniform with white every time. So there's a crossing guard for the school, an older Black man that I eventually met. And he said to me, you know, these white people are having a fit that y'all are in that house. And I said, oh, well, really? And he said, yeah. So that went on, for a while. And then maybe a year later, he said, oh my God, you won't believe what happened. Those same women have now come up to him and said, we have decided she's not Black, she's Chinese. Which means being Chinese, they could accept me being Chinese. That made it okay. Now I was wearing my hair different, so it wasn't like this back then. But that's what they did. In order to make peace with me, us being in here, they switched it over and said I was Chinese. The first neighborhood meeting I went to for Christmas, the neighbors had all told me, you won't be invited to anything. Don't look for, I was thinking, well, I didn't even know, so, but you all are telling me. So I get an invite. And I'm thinking, oh, well, gee, we weren't supposed to get one. So we go. And this lady comes up, my neighbor comes up and says, what are you doing here? And I said, what do you mean, what am I doing here? She said, why are you here? And I said, I got an invite. And then, so we got over that. And then later on that night, this woman, who I don't know, did not met her for the first time, she comes up to me. My husband is not with me, he's off. And she says to me, oh, you all are one of those. And I said, one of what? Y'all are one of those couples where you are light skinned and your husband is darker than you. What's up with that? We got one other like y'all too, except she straightens her hair and you don't. And then she just walks off. And I never saw her again. So let's talk about, what do you have questions? These are the things that happened to me in this neighborhood day in and day out. Slights, slurs, are you renting? Why do you go here? Why do you do this? But yet when my white neighbors do the exact same things, they are okay with it. So the slights and the slurs will often imply you're less intelligent. By saying you're articulate, it means you're not expected as an African American to speak well. It also means that I can host. It means you're not supposed to have those skills and those abilities because you don't have the know-how. So those are the mixed messages of what we get. It's always, somebody's always questioning your ability. And sometimes it's a compliment. Oh, you are not like the others. You're not like the others. You're different. You're different. You're not like the other ones. And of course you say, what other are you talking about? Other Black people. They don't work hard like you. They don't. And I will say, do you think that's a compliment? That's not a compliment. Sure it is. Look at where you are. You're different from them. Sometimes there will be compliments about your hair. Can I touch your hair? Now, for me personally, I'm not put off by that because I'm pretty open and I believe in educating. So, but I would say don't just do that to most Blacks because they don't like it. But generally speaking, I would not be put off. And Stephanie, you probably would not be surprised that I would say, sure, touch it. Let me touch yours as well. Because I found by touching hair that all white people's hair is not the same. It's not. But you gotta be willing to touch and become comfortable with each other to share the hair experience and to do it. So do you have any questions?
Well, since you've brought up hair and even mentioned complimenting hair, I have heard from others that that can be something that can be well-intended but taken offensively. Can you give some examples of what seems normal and right, and what does not seem normal and right?
And see, that's a real individual thing. Well, I can say this. I think if you like somebody's hair,
Say it.
I think you just say, I really like you with that hairstyle. And you just let it go. But don't say, let me touch it. Because that's intrusive without getting permission. But I would say if you really like somebody's hairstyle and you say to them, I like that on you. I think I like that. You look good in that. Just say it. And then it's up to them not to be so offensive. But if you start saying, is that a weave? Is that a wig? Well, now that will turn somebody off. But if you like somebody's hair, I think you can say it. I will also say this, the downside of Black people experiencing these microaggressions, these put downs, is you start to lose self-confidence. Because when you talk to white people and say, I want to talk to you about what you just said to me about being articulate. You know, we talked about that once before. Then they can turn on you. And then you lose a relationship or you lose a work relationship. So sometimes we keep it to ourselves. We don't speak up. We don't call it out or say what it is, even privately, because the downside is when we talk about it is typically white people will move away from us and start to view us as a problem person. But the downside is it can affect our self-esteem. I call them tiny pecks, dying by 1,000 little cuts. You can get depression, high blood pressure, diabetes. There are negative consequences for Black people who are working in all white spaces or choosing to live in all white spaces because you're trying to acquire some economic wealth for your offsprings. But it messes with your self-esteem. And at some point you start to doubt yourself, like playing it over and over in your head. Did I do something wrong? What could I have done different? So it means the burden is all on us. You walk away and you have no idea what you've left behind. By saying, why do you talk like that? Why do you have to be so emotional? Why do you want to go to Howard University? Why do you want to go to a Black school? University of Pennsylvania is better. Polly?
I'm just curious. You got me thinking about something. There have been people that in my workplace over the years, I'm since retired, but that African Americans that have unusual names.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the names, and I ask them as part of just getting to know them, does it mean something to, like I had one fellow's name is Babatunde Awanaka, and I love his name, and so I was just asking him, well, where's that come from, or what's the, what does your, what is it? And then I'm thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't be asking things like that because that's calling him out, or,
Did he seem offended?
No.
Yeah, because it's, and I don't know, I'm just going by the sound of his name. It probably may have had some connection to if he was from an African country and it was a way of keeping his name.
Yeah.
But there's another version of Black names that are a little odd, that don't have meaning. Like that name sounds like it might, and I could.
Right.
But let's take the name Shaniqua. That may not have any.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yet sometimes white people will say that's a funny name.
Mhm.
And so that's something that Jamals we hear, or we know Jamals and Shaniquas on an application means that it's not likely they would get a call back. And it also means that those particular people, more than Alma's out of Hispanic, it means soul. Most people sort of know that. But Shaniqua gets a different reaction. And the reaction from dominant culture, mainstream majority, which would be white, is what kind of name is that? And so the Shaniquas of the world get really tired of having to answer that, because I can't think of a name right now, but let's take the new press secretary's name. Her name is Jen Psaki, with the P in front of it. Well, generally speaking, white people can learn to say Psaki really quickly without ever saying, what kind of name is that? But with Shaniqua, it's funny and it's sounding. And so oftentimes the names that Black folks might choose for themselves, the dominant culture would make fun of. But yet when it's some 10-syllable European name, you'll typically don't have an issue with it. We think it's funny, but that's it. So I think if somebody has a name and you like it, I think it's okay to ask. And if they're defensive about it, just know it's probably about what has happened to them having that name. They may have been teased about it or something. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Anything that I say surprised you, or because this is a place to ask.
I think it made me sad.
Alma, there are a couple of hands up.
Oh, yes.
Roger or Sandy Reinecker, can't tell which of you that is.
I just wondered, Alma, you said have you traveled internationally, you and your husband? And
yeah. My husband did.
What was that experience like? Different in countries, or getting the same sort of reactions? Well,
that's a good question. I boycotted Europe for the last 20 years. Oh, our son lives in Australia. He lives there, he's married, he's been there for 19 years. So I typically boycott anything European for this reason. Because when I go to the museums, there's no hint that any Black person or person of color was ever there. And I got tired of that. So we landed in Singapore and China. That's where I fell in love. And that is where we continue to go to this day, is remote regions of China. Because for me, everybody was my color. So it meant for me every day, 24 hours a day, I went out on a sea of people that looked just like me. And it was just, the burden of being Black just did not exist. For 3 years, I'm walking behind my husband one night, going to dinner, and I notice his shoulders are so relaxed. And I say to him, by that time we may have been married 30 years, 40. And I say, I've never seen your shoulders that relaxed. And he said, I told you my favorite place has always been Asia. Now, Chinese are real prejudiced, because I have a Chinese friend and they share that with me. And I know they are, but for whatever reason, we have been very lucky and fortunate for 10 years. There's just, you just breathe. You just breathe. My body doesn't swell. I lose weight. I don't swell, because there's something about being accepted. When I say something, they want to hear it and ask questions. Traveling when President Obama was president, I was often asked in these remote regions in the Tibetan region of China. My husband was way down someplace outside. So in our guy came back to me, I said to him, why are they gathered over there? And he said, I don't know, I'll go see. And he comes back and he says, they want to know, are you Obama's people? I almost cried. I almost cried. See, I just cried because here's another thing. Asians can look at Black folks and see we're different in color. And so they said, so if I were to ask in my painting class, oh, why are you asking me, you know, are you Obama's cousin? They would say, because of your color. You look like him. So even being in Japan, not speaking Japanese, standing in line, there's somebody the winter of 2008 behind me saying, Obama? Obama? And I'm thinking, what? And I turn around. My husband is taller, so he has no idea. I turn around and they're smiling and they're saying, Obama. Being President Obama has been a blessing to me because no matter how remote you go, people know Obama. And they associate me with my skin color, never my husband, always me. Am I Obama's cousin? Or I'm his people, which means since I'm in southern parts of China, there are tribes of people. So that was it. Am I Obama's tribe? So I love that. Thank you. That was a good question because.
And you said yes, right?
Oh, yes, yes. We still go to remote regions of China because we don't see anybody white. Not until we get back to Shanghai. The whole time we're out there, there's nobody. It's just us and other people of color. And you breathe differently, you move different. Nobody's afraid of you. Nobody has any funny reactions to you. They're fine. So thanks for asking that, because I forgot.
Alma, Dick had his hand up. We'll call on him.
Okay. Oh, Dick.
I have a friend I've known for years. He lives in South Carolina. He's 78 years old now. After finishing his career at DuPont, we were both in the medical x-ray business. He went with a spinoff. And then when he retired from there, he became a consultant and he worked with companies that were having racial issues. And there are stories where he received compliments that were not compliments at all, to your point. But he shared with me a few weeks ago when we were talking that even after all this time and all these achievements and all of this life accomplishments, 2 grown wonderful sons, he says there are days that he cannot bring himself to leave the house because he can't bear what he's going to experience.
I don't experience that. My husband doesn't, but we have a childhood friend who is a very dark complexion Black man. And he has stopped going out because even though he goes to the same jeweler, been buying his wife her favorite pieces at the same place, the same jeweler for 10 years. Every time he goes there twice a year, he stopped because he knows anytime he shows up being as dark and as Black as he is, they're going to question him. They're going to put him through so many changes and they start to lock things up. And he doesn't go out casually anywhere.
Right.
So, because here we go.
No hooded
Because
sweatshirt, no sweatshirt, always
No,
dressed.
because he's trying to use class. He's trying to signal with his dress.
That I'm okay.
Class. I'm an educated man, and I have another Black friend who does the same thing. They don't go out casually. And they say, and like I even will have, I am aware that I have light skin privilege. And I've even had white women to say to me when we moved to Kansas, if you were any darker, it would be real hard functioning with you at this level. Thank goodness you're not really dark. But she told the truth. And because I had been sensing this all along, I had relief that somebody was comfortable telling the truth. So we know the darker we are, the more frightened white people are going to be, generally speaking. I have white group members that will say with me about race, not in front of the group, but I get a phone call and they will say, let me tell you, if you were darker and you were not as thin as you are, your body shape was more traditional, full figure Black woman, I wouldn't tolerate you in a heartbeat challenging me. Not for a second. So that's real, Sue. It's real. And it's real for some Black people. They get that, others don't. So you're
Well,
right.
and it's not for him every day. It's,
Right.
you know, there are days when he's just out and he's going, but every once in a while, it's just like, I'm not.
And it's that microaggression that I was talking about,
Exactly.
dying by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly.
He
Exactly.
never knows when he's going to get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And some
Thanks
days
for
you
bringing
deal
that
with
up.
it and some days you can't. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You can't.
Dick, you had a
Was Dick?
question?
I have a question and observation. My question is, do you observe the same patterns of microaggressions among children and young people with whom you interact?
I have, and Dick, that's a good question. I have started to socialize with younger people, mostly young progressive whites that are 20 to 40 years younger than me, because it's easier. Even if they make a mistake, if they're sitting at the table and they're talking about they got their ancestry DNA, and me and my husband are there and they go around the table and they ask everybody, but they don't ask us. They can recover from that and say the next day I get a phone call and say, can you come have coffee with me? Because I just got in touch with, you called me out last night and I don't know why you and Willie were sitting right there. I don't know why I didn't ask you. Can we go talk about it? And I'll go, yeah, let's go out and talk about it. So that is one of the differences that I get from younger white people between ages of 30 to 50. If they make a slip up, if something is offensive, they don't have a problem with me pointing it out. They don't get defensive. They're just aware that there's a lot to learn and that they're different. It's easier being with them. I prefer to be with them, Dick, because it's easier. But I hope you got something from this last tonight. And the reason I wanted to do it is because I wanted to share with you what it's like. No matter how long we have been in these all white spaces, sometimes going to a monthly meeting, my husband will open the door for me. He's behind me and I hear him take a deep because he's going in and he's not even aware of it. But it's what it is getting ready. You have to, and he was very popular, by the way. He was very popular, but it still meant he had some on him that he would have to sort of get in there and make people acknowledge him.
Yeah.
I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate you all. I really, really do. And thank you so much for listening to me, because I just wanted to share what it looks like in a real way It's not from a book, and it's not from some foreign this or that. This is right here in Wilmington. When I moved in, my white neighbor did not speak to me ever for 3 or 4 months until I locked myself out. Because no matter how it is, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be her equal. I'm not. It's okay for me to be a charity case where white people come in and they offer money and they do, but to have it Black that's your equal, Is it Sandy? No. Let me tell you let me share this one little thing with you before I go. Another major microaggression. A neighbor knows that when my husband travels, that we would do, she knows this. For business, when we went to Singapore, she knows we did Singapore Airline 18 hours nonstop. She knows that. Do you know what she started doing to me at some point last year for no reason? Sending me cheap flights is what it was called. Cheap flights to China. That's why? Why do you do this to me? It's another indignant. It is. It's just a slight. It's a way of putting me down from an economic standpoint. Repeatedly sending me, and that's what it was called. That flight was called, and then the airline, cheap flights to China, which is erasing all of my husband's accomplishments to say, I have to do that and do it that way. So that's another one of those little things that comes at us sometimes.
Well,
Good
thank you.
seeing Jane and Stephanie again because I knew them. And thanks for your questions.
So
And
Alma,
thanks so much. And thank you, Lynn.
yeah, we really appreciate you coming and sharing your stories with us. It's giving me a great idea as a topic for a Let's Talk About It series that we have had in the past. And I think this would make a great topic for one of our discussions. You know, less of a presentation, but more of a discussion format. And I think this would be a great topic for us to do one of our Let's Talk About It classes on.
And
So-
Alma, I think so often, all of what you're describing is so invisible to us. This friend that I mentioned talks about intent and impact. There is the intent that you have in saying something, and there is the impact it has on the person who is hearing it. And it is so important to be able to understand both sides.
And the impact, you're right, because the impact, you've worked, you're successful, you open your door, and some white guy that you've never met coming to the meeting says, are you renting? I mean, the gall.
So
But
thank
they
you.
feel quite comfortable doing it.
Doing it.
Mhm, mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I really appreciate it. I really do. It was really good seeing you all. And this was a good group and I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for
Thank you.
being here.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Hi,
Thanks, Sue Lynn.
Bye.